for everybody. It ain't 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 for everybody. Yeah, many you call, but few get chosen. Matthew 22:14. My righteousness gonna exceed that of the Pharisees.
If you're looking for high quality clothing at affordable costs, check out peculiarapparel.com. My name is Dawad.
And I'm Shayar, and we are the owners of Peculiar Apparel. All of our products are made with 100% natural fabrics, no mixed materials.
We have t-shirts for the man, woman, and child. These can be purchased with or without fringes.
Our women's line of t-shirts currently do not include fringes, but if that's something you desire, send us a DM at peculiarapparel_ on Instagram, or send us an email at help@peculiarapparel.com.
So once again, that is peculiarapparel.com.
Peculiar Apparel for peculiar people.
Drink good, let it replay. We bring it back to the holy days. Babylon, what we celebrate the Lord's day. I give a toast on the feast day. Eat that, we drink good, let it replay. We bring it back to the holy days. Babylon, what we celebrate the Lord's day. I give a toast on the feast day to all my loved ones no longer here, they passed away. I give a toast on the feast day to all my saints that repented and that changed their ways. I give a toast on the feast day, cause we don't celebrate holidays on heathen ways. I give a toast.
God, all praises. Shalom, family, shalom. First and foremost, I'll start by giving all praises to the Most High God, whose name is Yahweh, and I'll do so in the name of his beloved Son, Yahushua. Again, peace and blessings, family. I hope everybody is doing well. I got my brother Ezra on the stream. Got the brother Hurt, and I'm gonna pass it to him to let him do the intro and everything like that. So go ahead, Ken, you got it.
Shalom, shalom, family, shalom. Akim, Ezra, Aaron. So first off, we want to start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God, whose name is Yahweh, and we do so Hashem Yahweh Shai. That's in the name of his only begotten Son, who in the Paleo, whose name is Yahweh. But I still introduce the strength, gives people my family, you know what I'm saying? And we basically, you know, headed back to our hometown to go visit family before we head home to Kentucky for this weekend. So the name or the title for the lesson today is the Antichrist Controversy. It made me think about Arianism. But and the brother, the Aaron, will be giving the lesson. All praise to the Most High. But shalom, family, man. We pray everybody's in good health, good spirits, and hopefully, you know, you'll be edified. And if you know you're watching the stream, go ahead and tag someone, or also use the highlight feature to be able to get, you know, most of your family and friends that sees your content on their timeline, they can have access to this video. So if you don't mind, you know, comment, let us know you're watching with us. Also share, and also like the video. All praise to the Most High. You got it all.
All praises to the Most High. Appreciate the brother once again for extending the platform, you know, like always, you know, and once again, I'll say all praises to the Most High, Yahweh, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahushua. Thwada to my brother Hurt, and also thwada to my brother Ezra, who's going to be helping me out with the reading. Shalom King, if you want to say anything, you can before we get started.
Yeah, first and foremost, want to give all honor, glory, and praises to Most High Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. Like the brother was saying, pretty much like, you know, share this video. Lord willing, you're edified. You know, shalom, family.
Khan, the water king. And so, like the brother mentioned, or the brother Hurt mentioned, the name of this, you know, the lesson or the topic for this, you know, lesson is the Antichrist Controversy. And you know, this is in reference to certain passages, you know, that you read within the Johannine epistles, which are, you know, your 1 John and your 2 John, etc. But this is in reference to, you know, not only what you see there, but what people take from there and try to apply to other places in the Bible. You know, so they'll see the word Antichrist, and so they'll make a doctrine out of that. and then they'll, take it to, Matthew and, Colossians and what Thessalonians, etc. But what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna go into, the history contextually and historically, right? To actually unveil what the writer of John was talking about when he spoke about the Antichrist, right? So to just set the initial premise, um, an Antichrist, by definition or by the word's definition, is an adversary of Christ. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it up so you guys can see it, so you guys don't have to just take my word for it. And later on, we're gonna go into a few sources and things like that. But first, let's just start with the actual word for quote unquote Antichrist, right? Let me get my screen shared so that y'all can see it. So right here we see Strong's G500, which is Antichristos, and as you'll see, right here it says KJV translation count total is 5 times. So this particular word is used 5 times, and each time it's being referenced, it's talking about something specific, right? Something specific is being addressed. So all the other doctrines that people try to make out of the Antichrist, quote unquote, it doesn't reflect the context in which the Bible actually mentions the word Antichrist. And we're gonna go through go through with proving this by first utilizing lexical analysis, then the immediate context, and then we're gonna examine the theme, and then we're gonna go into some other methods, right? And we're gonna do it all through the Spirit and power of the Most High, of course, right? So let's start with the grammar and lexical analysis. Let's go to the book of 1 John, chapter 2, and verse 18. And King, if you can, just read 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, and I'm reading in the ESV.
All right. Let me start verse 18, right?
Con, just verse 18 for right now.
Okay. It says, children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come, Salakia. Therefore we know that it is the last hour.
Con. So, there are people that will read this and they'll say, oh, look, right there, it says the Antichrist is coming. Do you think he's going to be born in the next 10 years and blah, blah, blah? But honestly speaking, if you just examine even the English grammar, you like a breakdown like that doesn't even make sense in this chapter. But we're going to go into the Greek language to further break this down. So I'm going to pull up the forward interlinear. And as we see, again, like I mentioned before, the word Antichrist is G500. Antichristos, we see it used right here. And then we look down here, it's used again, which is Antichristoi, which is in the plural. So, and also this is a cut to anybody that just says, oh, the Antichrist is just one Antichrist. Because even when you read the English translation, it says there are many Antichrists. But people will run around and stand on business and say, hey, it's the Antichrist. But the writer of 1 John already said it's many Antichrists, plural. So that's a cut number one to that. But something that we have to pay attention to again within the grammar is this word right here, G1096, which is genomai, and is inflected as Yegunasin. And let's click on this, right? 1096. And I hate that it opens up another tab. So again, Genomai, which is 1096, it means again, I believe this one was in third person, a perfect verb, and it's a plural meaning, and it means to come into existence, arise, appear, etc. Right? So, just first takeaway grammatically is that Antichrist, plural, have arose by the time the writer of First John pens this letter. The second takeaway is that there are antichrists, as in more than one, right? So again, I just want to emphasize that the reason that these points are important is because within the so-called antichrist doctrine, from a Christian perspective, it typically it describes one person who will appear at the end of the world, quote unquote, and he'll deceive many, and he'll be this powerful influencer on the earth. But as we read right here, just in this one verse, we see that, for one, it was multi-antichrist, and number two, they appeared in the day of the writer of First John, right? So, and before I move on, any of you brothers got any points? Because I want to make sure I keep it open.
I think you're making a great assessment overall with the topic, especially with the way that people look at it. They're looking for this one ruler to come. And I remember being younger and being in the Christian church, and the way that they taught it, I thought that way also. So it had my eyes open. Every president that we would get in the United States, I'm looking for the character traits of the Antichrist. I'm looking for certain signs that just point to someone that's some evil dictator that's gonna come on the scene, and he's gonna have this authority and he's gonna abuse it in order to deceive the masses and basically want to exalt himself above Christ. And this is how you're taught to look at it. So you start looking for this person that's never gonna come, and then in all actuality, there are many antichrists all around us all the time, and we just don't realize it. Even from something as simple as the image of Christ, that's antichrist because that's not Christ. It's opposition, but all praise to the Most High. Because I see where you headed, and I like the build.
God, all praises to the Most High. All praises. And the water for the point as well. And Ak, if you got a point, brother Ezra, you can bring it out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're doing a phenomenal job, just explaining, how there's many antichrists, and if anything, instead of waiting on the antichrist, I mean, he's been here the whole time since John's time. He's been ruling. I don't think we have to wait on him anywhere, if we're gonna go with that dog.
God, all praise. That's a good point. Let's move on, right? Let's go to another passage. If you cannot read for me, just for right now, 1 John chapter 4, verse 3.
Okay, so this is the book of St. John, chapter 4, verses 3. And it reads, and it says, and every spirit that does not confess, right, Yahushua is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and now is in the world already.
God. So here it says every spirit that doesn't confess Yahushua, or in the English translation it says Jesus, is not from God. And this is in reference, again, if you just pay attention to the language within the text, this is in reference to Yahushua appearing in flesh, which we're going to go into a little bit later. But this verse says, this is the spirit of Antichrist, which they heard was coming and now is in the world, right? So again, this is the writer of First John. He wrote this epistle as well as the second epistle, right? And he speaks of the Antichrist, and he says that, or I guess Antichrist plural, because we read it in his other the other chapter, but he says that they're already in the world, So this isn't anything that is like, all right, you know, I wonder who it is, right? No, like the people that were dealing with this, John and his disciples, they knew exactly who these people were, and so they knew to mark them and to get away from them, right? There's actually a matter of fact, and I should have put it to the side to go into, but I was reading in this particular book. It's called the New Testament World, Historical Context, etc. And it gives an account of Saint John. He was in like a bathhouse, and it was this particular heretic that was kind of pushing this doctrine, right? His name is I believe his name was Cerinthus, right? And it said that John was like, he heard that he was like in the vicinity, and he was like, oh no, I'm about to get away from this dude, for the Lord strike this bathhouse. And so the people, like, especially the apostles, they knew who these people were, and they did not want to be nowhere near them, because the Lord could strike judgment at any time. So again, the notion that, we don't know who the Antichrist is, we're waiting for him to make himself manifest, and like that's not nothing that the apostles was pushing. Like, that's not what the scriptures teach, right? But real quick, let's take a look at the lexical data for this particular passage, right? Let's go into we can just pull up the interlinear, forward interlinear, and again, you'll see that it utilizes the word or the root antichrist or antichristos, and it utilizes the inflection antichristo, which is when you click a little bit on here, it gives you some of the parsing, and it says it's in a genitive singular masculine, and this is something that indicates that the possessing that it's the possessing party, and right here the subject, because the possessing party, it possesses the subject, and the subject is a particular spirit, so these particular individuals are moving in the spirit of Antichrist, and this was on several people, right? So several people would have been called Antichrist. This person, he's teaching this particular doctrine that lines up with the certain parameters that are already set. That's an Antichrist, etc. Again, there's no ambiguity to what this is. And so, that's something I do want to harp on as well, because, you have people like I'm listening to a conversation this week, and I just seen this comment. That's funny, but I'm having a conversation this week, and this dude, he's like, he always brings this doctrine out, but he says, if you don't believe that Jesus was born of just Mary, just a virgin, then you're an Antichrist. And that's like what Bible verse say that? Like, but people, they're just making their own definition of what an Antichrist is. But when you look, like, just if you look at the surface of what John says, like how the sister Wendy put, it'll be a brother that denies that Yahushua existed. It denies that he ever came into existence. He didn't live. He didn't walk the earth, etc. That's a reasonable takeaway, because the text, just on a surface level, it reads like that. But for people to start going a step further and saying, yeah, if you don't believe in a three-part triune Godhead, then you're an Antichrist. And if you don't believe in a virgin birth and all of like, again, it starts to be a bit much, and that's where that's where dogma comes into play, and that's where it starts to permeate and I, honestly speaking, um poison the community, so to speak, right? But it's a little bit more on this, right? Let me go back to the interlinear. That was a good point, Sister Wendy. But let's look at this particular word. Let's look down. G2064, which is erchatai, which is that's the inflection, G2064, and the root is erchomai. And when you look at this particular word, let me pull it up. It actually it's a verb, and it means to come. Yeah, basically to come or to appear, right? So, and I believe when we looked at it, grammatically speaking, it's in the present middle indicative. So, basically it's saying that this particular you know this particular party, dealing with the person that's described as an antichrist, they are appearing currently. So this is something that's currently going on. And when you look again at the passage itself, just reading it in the English translation, it says, "This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming, and now is in the world already." So this isn't something that they were waiting on, and they, it never happened, and they were never able to identify. But it said that, they heard that they were coming, and now they're in the world already, right? And already, grammatically speaking, is dealing with something that is happening and has happened, right? So, I can, if y'all got any points, y'all can bring them out. If not, we can move on.
You doing fine.
God, all praises, all praises. So, next, if you can, uh, read First John chapter 2, verse 18 through 19.
So this is the book of First John, chapter 18 through 19. It says, "Children, Christ is coming. So now many antichrists are. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But when they went out, that it might come plain that they all are not of us."
God, so we see in verse 18, it clarifies that there are many antichrists by this particular time, like I mentioned before. And in verse 19, it says that they went out from us, but they were not of us, and they departed from them, to make it plain that they are not of us, right? And this is in reference to a number of disciples in the Johannine community that again, they, as we would understand it, they quote unquote bugged out, and they started to believe and teach false doctrine that concerned Yahushua and him coming in the flesh, right? Or lack thereof. Like they started to teach that Yahushua, he couldn't have came in the flesh and things like that. And we're gonna get into it, right? God, sis said they're not like us. That's on point. And I was thinking about that too. That's funny. But real quick, we're gonna bring this out in the Net Bible, and then this a little translator note that I want to get into as well, right? If you can, I'm gonna share my screen. Read for me Um, yeah, matter of fact, I'm gonna blow the screen up too. This might be, but read for me. I highlighted verse 18 all the way to 19. I gotta highlight it.
Okay, so it says, children, it is the last hour, just as you heard the Antichrist is coming. So now many Antichrists has appeared. We know from that it is the last hour. But they went out from us, but they did not really belong to us, because if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us, but they went out from us to demonstrate that all of them do not belong to us.
Con, So the Net Bible, it pretty much says the same thing. But I wanted to I wanted y'all to check out this translator note. And real quick, I'll read it. It's all the way at the bottom. Let me try to blow my screen up. Hopefully it's you're able to see it. But it says all of them do not belong to us. Boy. Yeah, let me screen left. There it says all of them do not belong to us. The opponents chose to depart rather than remain in fellowship with the community to which the author writes and with which he associates himself. This demonstrates conclusively to the author that they never really belonged to that community at all, in spite of what they were claiming. In 1 John 2:19, 1 John 2:19 indicates that the departure was apparently the opponent's own decision rather than being thrown out or excommunicated. But for John, if they had been genuine believers, they would have remained in fellowship. Now they have gone out into the world where they belong. And that's and they cite 1 John 4 and 5. But again, I just wanted to read that because that actually speaks to the point I was making earlier about these particular people being a part of the community that the writer of 1 John is writing to, and this would have been the Johannine community, the disciples of John, right? And they're, John and his disciples, they were responsible for the Gospel of John, as well as the prologue and the ending, and the epistles of John, right? But again, that's a textual criticism conversation for another day. But let's continue on. Let's jump back to 1 John 2, and I read for me verses 20 through 23.
Okay, so this is the book of John, chapter 2, verses 20, right? And it says, but you have been anointed by the Holy One, and you all have knowledge. I write unto you not because you do not know the truth, but because you know it, and because no lie is of the truth. Who is the liar, but who denies that Yahweh Shai is Hamashiach? This is the Antichrist. He he who denies the Father and the Son, right? That would be Antichrist, according to the Bible. And you want me to keep reading?
Oh, Salaki, I was on mute.
So
I'm
verses
speaking. Hey, Salaki, I was speaking out and I'm on mute. Salaki, can you read verse 23 as well?
okay, good. You want me to read verse 23 as well?
Con.
Okay, it says no one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever confesses the Son has the Father also.
Con, all praises. So, as we see in these particular verses, the writer says, to the audience, that he's speaking to, he says that they have been anointed by the Holy One and they have knowledge, so he's just reaffirming, what they already know, right? In some translations, it says they have unction from the Holy One, etc. Right? But he goes on to say a little bit later, who a liar is, or he describes who a liar is. And he says it's he who denies that Yahweh Shai is Mashiach. And then he says, he is the Antichrist. So this one is the Antichrist, right? And then he says, the one who denies the Father and Son, right? So this person that's being described as an Antichrist is somebody that denies that Yahushua is the anointed, and and by this they would deny the Father and the Son. Now, again, let's make some sense of this, because again, these people, they were, they would have already been believers according to what the writer of First John already said, right? Because it said they went out, from them. So they, again, they were a part of this particular community, and they, apparently claimed to believe, but they went out and into apostasy, and if you don't know what apostasy is, that's just referring to when you abandon your faith, so to speak, right? But again, these people, they used to believe, apparently they used to believe just like the followers of John and the people within this community, but they started taking on heretical doctrines, and it caused them to be deceived, into believing falsehoods, about the identity of Yahushua, and that he didn't, have, he didn't come in flesh and stuff like that. And we're going to go a little bit further into proving that, right? But before I move forward though, your brothers got any points?
Con,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so yeah, like you were saying about the Antichrist, just like even earlier talking about the virgin birth, like that would be an Antichrist because you're denying him coming into the flesh, and the scripture says that he's came into the flesh. That would be like, the opposite of, pretty much what they teach, about the Antichrist, about, what you're supposed to believe when it.
Oh, praises. And brother Hurt, you said you had something?
Con. Yeah. So the point you made, I don't know exactly where you were reading from, where it was saying that they weren't actually a part of that particular community, like they were never a part of that particular community, even though contrary to what they may have said or how it may have seemed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give me Romans 8:16, and it also parallels with what you just got through bringing up.
God, this is the book of Romans 8 and verse 16. It says, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God.
God. So, like, to reject the Messiah, his promised son, who he gave to us, basically is showing that your spirit don't even bear witness. Which, if your spirit isn't bearing witness, that means the Holy Spirit isn't with you, because you don't even have the wisdom to discern that, hey, this was the son that the Most High God sent for salvation to redeem us back. So it's something missing. That one thing that's missing for sure would be the Holy Spirit, for you to be able to, to lean on, to give you wisdom, to teach you all things. Like we know the Messiah out of his own mouth said, hey, I'm going to send the Comforter, and he's going to teach you all things. So if we're not able to discern this, that means the Holy Spirit is missing. And it also means that your spirit isn't bearing witness with, the brethren that do believe in the Messiah.
Excellent point. All praises. And I appreciate y'all brother.
There's a point.
Go ahead, King.
Yeah, there's one more I did wanted to mention. I think there's a scripture that talks about because I did make a point earlier. I think it does speak about how it says he that denies the Son has came into the flesh, right? Something like that. I think it's in First John chapter 4.
And matter of fact, that's where we about to go.
Yeah, I went into about the point about coming into flesh. Bring it out then.
Yeah, all praises to the Most High, man. Brothers on one accord. But yeah, like again, just just to continue on with this particular theme, and dealing with the same author as well, same one that wrote First John 2. Let's go back to First John chapter 4, right? And if you can read for me First John chapter 1, I'm sorry, chapter 4, verse 1 through 2.
Okay, so this is the book of John, First John, chapter 4, verses 1. It says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirit to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out in the world." It says, "But this you know the Spirit of God," right? Every spirit that confesses that Yahushua HaMashiach has come in the flesh is from God, right? And it says,
Con,
and every spirit that
con, not
does
that.
not
That's good.
confess.
That's good right there. That's good right there. Because we're
Okay,
gonna
right,
get to
go
verse 3. Con,
ahead. Okay.
but but right there, just to start off, we see that the writer, again, it's the same author of First John 2. He says not to believe every spirit, but to test the spirits to see if they are from the Most High, because many false teachers or false prophets have gone out. And again, this is in reference to those particular people that departed from this particular community, or quote unquote were, a part of that particular community, right? And then in verse 2, it says the author, or we see that the author, he gives, a particular benchmark for how to determine if one has a spirit of the Most High. And that particular benchmark is that one confesses Yahweh Shai, the anointed has come into the flesh. And when you go into that particular word for confess, it's dealing in reference to, conceding or agreeing with, right? So this is not just, somebody just saying something, because an argument that somebody could say is, well, yeah, well, he anybody can just say they believe that Jesus came in the flesh, and they could be lying to you, but the text is actually conveying the point of somebody that actually agrees and concedes to this fact, right? And so if anybody has ever heard of you know like um like in certain religions, they have what you would call like confessions of faith. These are things that they actually concede to, and they yield to or believe, right? So it's not just, yeah, we believe, you have to have faith in Christ, but they don't really believe it. No, this is something that they actually believe. So when the writer says this, someone that has the spirit from the Most High, they're gonna concede to the fact that Yahweh Shai has came in the flesh, right? That's gonna be something that's not like a debate. You know what I'm saying? So let's continue on. If you cannot, just read verse 3.
So this is book of John, First John chapter 4, verses 3, and it says, "And every spirit that does not confess Yahushua is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming, and now is in the world already."
Con. So right there it said that every spirit that doesn't confess Yahweh Shai, they are not from the Most High. And he goes on to say that the Antichrist is in the world already. So this is an opponent that's already, they've already appeared. This isn't something that, they're waiting on and saying, hey, you're going to have to wait in the future and anything like that. But this is something that, or this is a person or a group of people, etc., that have already been made manifest, and they know who these specific groups of people are. Like they've already marked them. Like I believe in the book of Romans, it says to mark them which teach heresies and cause divisions, roughly paraphrasing. I think it's in the book of Romans, the 16th chapter. So again, let's continue on with the same author, Second John. Second John chapter 1. It's only one chapter anyway. Second John chapter 1, verse 7. And I just read for me verse 7 by itself.
So this is the book of Second John, right? Chapter 1, verse 7. It says, "For many deceivers has gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Yahweh Shai Hamashiach in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist."
Con, con. So the writer here, he says many deceivers have gone into the world, right? And it describes these particular deceivers as those who don't confess the coming of Yahweh Shai in the flesh, and it calls these people antichrists, right? So again, there's no conversation of, do like, like I've heard a lot of things. Like people will say, yeah, if you believe that Jesus Christ, he only died for, and again, that's what Christians will say. Obviously, they'll say, if you believe that Christ, the Messiah only died for Israel, then you're an antichrist. You don't believe in the true gospel. And then they'll say, if you believe that he had a biological father, then you're an antichrist. You don't believe in the true gospel. You don't believe the testimony was written. If you believe, and they'll just name off all of these dogmatic positions that Christians hold to, and they'll say, if you don't believe these things, then you're an antichrist. But the Bible actually said that an antichrist, and they were actually dealing with people that were, that they would have called antichrist, but the Bible actually specified these particular people, and what these particular people believed was that the Mashiach didn't actually come into the flesh. Like that's that's what the argument was. Like it wasn't about, is he the most high God? It wasn't about him being born of it wasn't about any of those things. When you read in every single account that speaks about Antichrist, and it's only in the Bible, like I said, 5 times. You never see it about all of these conversations that people are having. But again, people, they make, they'll make a doctrine out of anything, you know. But before I move on, any of y'all brothers got any points?
Yeah,
La
they'll make they'll make doctrines like you mentioned, out of thin air. Like for example, that Lucifer doctrine. I remember we kind of harped on that like a while back. Like even Lucifer became a whole like doctrine, right? Just off that alone.
Con, that's on point. Yeah, that's a good example. All praises. Um, so now let's get to the academic analysis, or basically just the bringing out of scholastic sources. Um, let's look at I should have this pulled up. Let me see. Let's look at this is a book called A Survey of the New Testament, and it's by Robert H. Gundry, and this is on page 883. And if you can, my brother, can you just read for me the section? It just says docetism, just this paragraph right here. And mind you, this is for because like if you're not familiar with like a New Testament survey or Old Testament survey, basically what it does is it's a book that gives you like quote unquote background information on a particular book in the Old or New Testament that you're reading. So throughout this book, it gives you quote unquote background information on Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, etc. So this is in the section for First John, right? So this is just giving some background information on it. But if you cannot, just read for me. Let me try to blow it up just a tad bit. Just read the section that says docetism right here. Just that paragraph.
Okay, I got you.
Con.
Yeah, it says working on the same presupposition that anything material and physical must necessarily be evil, right? And gnostics tried to avoid the incarnation and bodily death of Yahweh Shai Mashiach by saying that he only seemed to be human, so-called uh, Dato-
Docetism.
Doctoism, Dec- Dotism,
Docetism. Con.
for from the Greek. Oh, Docetism. All right, that's fine. It says from the Greek verb doken
Con.
to seem. Therefore, John emphasized the reality of the incarnation, what we have heard and what we have seen with our eyes, and what we have observed and our hands felt, and what we have seen. Ironically, from the modern standpoint, the first Christ, Christological heresy attacked the humanity of Jesus rather than his deity.
Con. So basically just in a nutshell, um this is a source that corroborates what we've been going into this entire lesson, because it touches on the fact that this particular doctrine and the proponents of it teach that Yahweh Shai didn't come in the flesh, nor did he actually die, but it just seemed that way, right? And hence the word dokain or dokin, which means to seem, right? So um just to emphasize another point in all of this is that there are a lot of folks, like I mentioned, they'll call you an antichrist for not saying or for not confessing, quote unquote, that Yahweh Shai is the Most High, and that he was born. That they'll say you're an antichrist for saying he was born of Joseph and Mary, and not just Mary. But we see that the writer who penned First John actually battled Yahweh Shai's humanity, him actually being a human being versus him being God of any sort. So, in the writer of this particular source, he actually says that. He says the first Christological heresy attacked the humanity of Yahweh Shai rather than his deity. So we see right here that they weren't having like an issue with like we don't see them pinning anything about, yes, and you must believe he was born of virgin, blah blah blah, all of these things. But they're saying, hey, you must believe he's an actual human being and that he came into flesh. Like when you read in the book of Colossians 2, because they were having similar battles, with similar doctrines like docetism. You see that Paul says that he has the fullness of deity bodily. And when you look at that word bodily, it's dealing with, you having a corporal body or an actual human body that's, and it's being juxtaposed from, a spirit. So like the apostles, they had to fight people trying to teach that Yahweh Shai, he was just a spirit and all of these things. They actually had to teach that he was a human being. And that's why you even read in the text like Hebrews 2, is it says that he was made like his brothers in every way. Like a text like that can't be true if he was just a spirit and he seemed like an actual human being. And also just a knock on like the virgin birth. um he wouldn't actually be a human being if he didn't have a biological father, because you being a human being requires you to have a biological father. But that's just like a side point, right? But any of y'all brothers got any points on this particular source before we move to the next one?
Can be 100% God and 100% human. Like if you're 100% of something, then that's what you are. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
and that's the thing they're saying. Like, yeah, he was God, incarnate, and just that's antichrist because, and not only that, another thing is going against his teachings. That would be an antichrist. Like, for example, he never taught he was equal to the Father and things of that nature. And this is another thing that they teach. Oh, if you don't believe that the triune God, like they're all equal, they're all you know uh have the same authority, then you're an antichrist. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a thing. That's a sidebar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All praises. Um. We can move on to the next source, right? This one, nice. So this next one is it's a book called The World of the New Testament: Cultural, Social, and Historical Context, and it's by Joel B. Green. And this is from page 434. Let me try to pull it up. I'm trying to pull it up, and I'm gonna get my screen shared. And all right, cool. And I'm gonna blow up my screen too. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just highlight what I need read. Try to blow this up a little bit more. So just read to the where I have highlighted at.
All right, it says together the apostolic fathers and the apocryphal gospels shed light on early Christianity and by extension the NT as well, the New Testament. In both collections, we found that the rumblings of battle over the controversy of doctism, a battle first instant in text like First John chapter 4 verses 2 to 3.
So right here, just to give a little bit of background, this is speaking in regards to just like background and context for it says the apostolic fathers, so like it's dealing with like the early church fathers and like the apostles as well. And then it says apocryphal gospels, so like like it's like debated gospels, like like they say the gospel of Peter and all of that stuff, right? But it goes on to say that it says in both collections we find rumblings of battle over the controversy of docetism. And then it says it was first instance in text like First John 4 2 through 3, which we read a little bit earlier. But again, this is echoing the sentiments that we've been going into tonight, right? Because again, the main point was to look at the historical context and what the writer of First John was actually speaking about. He wasn't making up doctrine and saying, yo, if you don't believe in a virgin birth or you don't believe in triune God, you're an Antichrist. He wasn't being ambiguous, but he was being very specific, and he was giving these particular markers and what made these particular people Antichrist, again, plural. So real quick, what we could do is we could read again, we could just read First John chapter 4 verse 2 through 3, because I mean we read it. This will be the third time we reading this tonight, but again, just so that it's fresh in your minds, we could bring it back. So if you can just read First John chapter 4 verse 2 through 3. Yeah, Ezra, you still there?
All right, so like my connection was tripping. There's First John chapter 4 verses 2. It says, "But this the Spirit of God, every spirit that confess that Yahweh Shai Mashiach has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Yahweh Shai is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and now is in the world already."
So just to corroborate it with the source that we read. Let me pull it back up once again. It literally says that the the historical context behind this particular passage is the battle over Docetism, right? So again, it's funny it uses this word controversy. The name of this lesson is the Antichrist Controversy, because so many people, they'll go back and forth and they'll bring out like certain argumentation to say, yeah, he's the Antichrist and this person is the Antichrist and blah blah blah, and then they'll try to say you're an Antichrist for not believing a certain doctrine. But the like when you read the actual text, the markers are very clear on what they were talking about, and if you just if you do a little bit of research, you'll be able to link it with that history and the actual Bible that you're reading, because it's very clear. It says someone that doesn't believe that Yahushua actually came in the flesh. Like that's when you look at what Docetism is, it's very clear. And what I'm going to do, unless you brothers got any points, you guys can bring them out. But we're going to look at a very explicit definition of the word Docetism. You brothers got any points before we bring this out? Con all praises. So let's jump down to page 581, and this is the glossary. And matter of fact, I'll read it, right? It says Docetism, Greek. Let me try to see if I can no, that's fine. Well, it says Docetism, Greek dokeo, meaning I seem or I appear. The belief of a group of Christians of the late 1st century and throughout the 2nd century who taught that Yahushua only appeared to have a body. Right. So let's just check that out. It says that it clarified them as Christians. First off, that's funny, but it says that they taught that Yahushua only appeared to have a body. Right. So continuing on, it says they taught that Mashiach descended upon Yahushua at his baptism, only appeared to suffer on the cross, and instead ascended just prior to the cross. This is a Gnostic belief that emphasized the corruptness of human flesh and sought to preserve the Messiah from such corruption. So basically, in their mind, they're saying, well, the Messiah is no way that he could have actually been human because he would be corrupt, right? This is what they're thinking. But again, this is heretical by so many means, because if Yahushua is an actual person, he's actually like an historical figure. He would have actually been born of 2 parents and had a human body and all of those things, right? And this is so much to really touch on concerning this, but I want to just real quick jump to another source. But before I move on, I want to make sure you brothers, if y'all got anything, y'all could bring it out. Y'all brothers got anything?
I ain't got nothing.
All praises. So last thing, I'm gonna try to end it off with this particular source right here. And this is from erminblog.org. And if y'all not familiar, Bart Ehrman, he's like, he's a quote unquote renowned New Testament scholar. Like if you look into like, New Testament textual criticism, his name is gonna pop up, right? So, hey, you got a point? Well, okay, Slack it. But yeah, this, just a little bit of background, for the person that's, kind of speaking right here, right? But matter of fact, It's a little bit to read. So I'll just read it. It says, matter of fact, if you can you just read just these two paragraphs and then I'll pick up after?
You said the first two paragraphs.
Con.
Okay, it says the most important event in the recent history of the community is that it experienced a serious rift. It says the author of First John indicates that a faction from within the community split off from the rest of the group and left in a huff. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But by going out, they made it plain that none of them belongs to us. In First John 2, verses 19, it says, "Why did the Christian community split, with some members leaving, pres- uh, presum- presume
Presumably.
presumably to start their own presumably to start their own congregation in the next few verses that the author designates those who left as liars and antichrists, a word that literally means those who are opposed to Christ. He then contrasts them with those who have remained, who know the truth. What do these antichrists believe that makes them so heinous to this author? He indicates that he have denied that Jesus is the Christ. The author language may appear to suggest that those who seceded from the community, a group that some scholars have labeled secessionists, are Jews who failed to acknowledge that Jesus is the Messiah, but they used to belong to the community. That is, they were Christians. In what sense then could they deny that Jesus is the Christ?
Con. So just to kind of touch on a few things here. It speaks to the fact of a serious rift between this particular community, and this community is in reference to the Johannine community, which were John and his disciples, right? But the author he quotes, or the person that wrote this blog, he quotes 1 John 2:19, when he says they went out from us, but they didn't belong to us, because if they would have belonged to us, they would have remained. But they made it plain that they weren't, or that they didn't belong to us, right? Now, when you read within this, the paragraph that the brother read, um, he speaks to the fact of, or he speaks to the question of like what made them, so heinous. Like, why does the author speak about them in this particular way? Like, why is he calling them liars and antichrists? Because the word antichrist, it means those who are opposed to Christ, or adversarial to Christ or Messiah, right? So he basically, like, when you read this particular part here, he gives like what some people would believe as a theory. Like, people, like, just reading this, they would think, oh yeah, he's talking about some Jews that failed to acknowledge that Yahushua is the Messiah. But this particular author, and he says rightly, he says, but they used to belong to the community. So these weren't just, some like regular old Jews that just denied the Messiah, but they were a part of the community. And, like I said earlier, they started to bug out, right? They started to, take on certain doctrines that were heretical and incorrect about Yahushua. Case in point, Yahushua didn't actually have a body. Like, they started teaching things like that. And so, something like that is, a very heretical doctrine, because Yahushua indeed did have a physical body. He indeed did die on literal stake or cross, etc. Right? It didn't seem like he did anything, right? But it's a little bit more on this. Let me continue on. It says there are two other places where the author discusses these antichrists. In 1 John 4:2-3, the author claims that unlike those who belong to God, the Antichrist refuses or refuse to confess that Yahushua has came or has come in the flesh. A similar statement occurs in 2 John 7, where the Antichrists are called deceivers who have gone out into the world and are said to deny that Yahushua has come in the flesh. These descriptions suggest that the secessionists may have held a point that we know about from other sources from about the same period, such as the writings of Ignatius, and that's a church father, which we will be discussing at greater length in chapter 28. Ignatius opposed the group of Christians who, like Marcion a few years later, see chapter 1, maintained that Yahushua was not himself a flesh and blood human being, but was completely and only divine. Right. So again, this is Marcion. He's a quote unquote heretic that again he had some subscription of the Messiah, but obviously it was off, super off, because and just to give y'all a little bit of background, Marcion he believed that the God in the Old Testament and the God in the New Testament were two different gods. And it's to the point where he went and made his own canon. It's the first New Testament canon, and it only had like a short version of Luke and just all of Paul's letters. Like it's super, super crazy. But he was one of these people that believed that, Yahushua, he didn't, actually have flesh and blood. He wasn't like an actual human being, but he was just only divine in the spirit, right? And he would have seemed to have existed in the flesh, right? But you got to point out,
fully God and fully man. and this is
And
where you get a
100% at
lot
that.
of right, right. But this is where you get a lot of brothers and sisters who actually stop, don't want to subscribe to the New Testament. They don't believe in Yahweh Shai. They start to call him idol Shai. It comes from the doctrines that stems from not actually analyzing the text properly and acting like Yahweh Shai came and he came with new laws. So now you no longer have to keep the laws, the so-called Mosaic law, which we know ain't really Mosaic law, it's the laws of God. But since he came, now these things are done away with. You don't have to do them anymore. And so people start to look at that and say, man, see, that's an idol. But, they're right in the sense of how someone is using that doctrine and how they're worshiping Christ and they're replacing the Most High God with Christ. And that would make him an idol. They make him an idol. He's not an idol, but people with that type of doctrine make him an idol. And that did cause a split. And I mean, it causes a split in the modern day. And even if, someone understands that, yeah, you still have to keep the laws and you're supposed to have faith in Christ, they'll reject that and say, nah, I ain't got to have faith in him. I ain't got to have faith in nobody but God. But if you got faith in God, you're going to believe the Son who he sent. You can kind of compare it with, let's just say, there's a new doctrine going around and there's a group of brothers and they spread this doctrine about, nah, we don't believe it. I said, well, no prophets. You will not believe in anything but Ezekiel or Isaiah, right? If that happens, now there's a lot of prophecies that are end time prophecies. People saying they don't believe in. So now these things are not going to happen. It's the same thing with Yahushua. It can save us, redeem us from curses that we were under because we broke these certain sins that we couldn't be forgiven for. And you just start saying, nah, that ain't it. It's salvation away.
hey King, you in the Matrix. Hey, I get you in the Matrix, man. You was talking good through the spirit too, man. Lord in Christ.
Can you hear me now?
Con, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, man, service bars going up, but what was the last thing?
You staticky. But the last thing we heard was he was making a point about, you know, brothers, like if brothers came out with a new doctrine like concerning Isaiah and and juxtaposing with the other prophecies. He was making that point.
If we didn't say nothing Isaiah and Ezekiel spoke was prophecy of God, those books actually tell a lot about us coming out of our captivity. And if we don't believe them, it's still bad.
It was a little bit better. Try again now because you good. You sound good now.
Yeah, just like if we don't believe that, you know, Ezekiel, Isaiah were prophets from the Most High God, it's basically taking away certain aspects of our salvation that they spoke about. And that's the same thing with Yahweh. So yeah, it's like, you know, it's really worse when you don't believe in the Messiah. But just thinking, you know, from the
Oh man, the brother dropped out, and that was really a profound point
Man,
that the
Satan
brother was
trying
trying
to
to
take
get
away the
into.
word, man.
Con,
Satan's trying to take away the word.
but until the brother hop back on, I'm gonna try to continue in this just a little bit, and then I'm gonna pass it back to the brother, right? But it says it says if let me just jump down here. It says Yahushua was not really a human; he merely appeared to be one, and that's, you know, that's the ideology of these people that the Epistle of John is like rebuking, because they're saying, yeah, he just appeared to be human, but he wasn't really human. He was really God in the flesh and all of these things. Like, and so they were coming out with like weird doctrines, and the apostles, they're like, no, that's not, that's not what's going on, right? But we got the brother back, so I'll pass it back to him so he can finish his point. Hey, brother, hurt you here? He might be in the matrix a little bit, so I'm gonna just try to speed a little bit through. It says these Christians came to be known by their opponents as Docetus, a term that derives from the Greek verb for appear or seem. They were opposed by Christian leaders like Ignatius, who took umbrage, which
Can I
means,
be heard?
Khan, you good now?
Yeah, I think my service was Antichrist for a little while.
God.
But yeah, so yeah, just the point with Ezekiel and Isaiah, I'm using those prophets because those are two major prophets that had some major prophecies about the end times. And if you get, you know, a host of brothers that start a doctrine and say, nah, them were no prophets, them was just some men talking crazy. So that's gonna disqualify the things that they said, and it's basically going to take away some of the promised salvation that the Most High God, you know, gave them to speak on. And it's the same thing with Yahushua, which is really worse with Yahushua, because if you're not believing on Yahushua, the message he brought, you don't even have no salvation. So, you know, it's definitely a major thing, and it can cause a big split within a community.
Khan, all praises. Beautiful analogy and point. And I'm gonna read this point real quick, right? So right here it says, it says these Christians came to be known by their opponents as Docetus, a term that derives from the Greek verb for appear or seem. They were opposed by Christian leaders like Ignatius, who took umbrage at the idea that Yahushua and the things he did, including his death on the cross, were all a show. For Ignatius, Yahushua was a real man with a real body who shed real blood and died a real death. So Ignatius, that brother in the spirit, right? He believed it correctly, as the scriptures say. But the people that he's battling, which are called Docetists, or John is writing as Antichrist, they believe that it seemed like he actually walked the earth, and it seemed like he actually was born and died on the cross and all of those things, but it didn't actually happen, right? But let me bring this out. First John, it's like not First John, First Corinthians. I want to see, believe, First Corinthians 15:14, right? It says, and if Mashiach has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain, right? And so in order for Yahweh Shah to be raised, and that's referring to him being raised from the dead, he would have had to have actually died, right? But with the doctrine like that, that's like not even, it's just all like an appearance, like it looked like that, but it didn't actually happen. And so, just with this particular doctrine, it gets to be sort of dangerous because and that's why John's writing like this, because you're actually saying that these things didn't literally happen, right? And so that's why these people were being called deceivers, liars, and antichrists. And this is the context that the writer in John is talking about. So if we're dealing with somebody today that's like, look, Yahweh Shai, he didn't exist. He wasn't really born. He didn't really die. That's not real, blah, blah, blah. You could tag the Antichrist sticker on them, right? Because they're speaking, some of the same things that these Gnostics were speaking, right? Like they're, speaking along the same lines. But if somebody is saying to you, nah, I don't, I don't believe in a virgin birth. I believe Yahweh Shah actually had a biological father. Or they say, nah, I don't believe that he's the Most High God. I believe he's the Son, sure, but he not, part of a triune God. You can't say that they're an antichrist, because that's not what historically was going on. That's not what, how the writer looked at it, and that's not even what the text even alludes to, right? But let me see. I think it might be a little bit. It's a whole lot in here, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just read this last part, right? It says, it may be that the secessionists from the Johannine community had developed a docetic kind of Christology. In the words of the author, they denied that Yahushua had come in the flesh. If they were, in fact, early docetists, then a number of other things that the author says in these letters makes considerable sense. Take, for instance, the opening words of 1 John. Readers who do not realize that the essay is being written because of a group of docetic Christians have succeeded from the community may not understand why the author begins his work the way he does, with a prologue that in many ways is reminiscent of the prologue to the fourth gospel, with which he was probably familiar. And the fourth gospel is the Gospel of John, right? But again, what's being stated is that for what the writer of First John is speaking to, he's clarifying that Yahushua did actually come in the flesh. And when you read First John, the first chapter, he says, we actually beheld this person, or we actually saw this person, we actually we heard him, etc. All of these things. He was a real person. And so it actually, like he's saying, it makes a lot of sense that the writer would be speaking to these things, because he's battling people that deny this. They deny these facts that Yahushua actually had a physical body and actually walked around and spoke and all of those things. Like they started to deny those things. And so with that being said, right, it makes mention of how it's reminiscent to the prologue to the fourth gospel, which is John, the first chapter, verses 1 all the way down to 18. That's the prologue, right? And it makes mention of how the word was in the beginning and it was made flesh and we beheld the word, right? And so again, it's just speaking to the fact that Yahushua, which was, ultimately made synonymous with the word, he actually was, a physical person, who had an actual body, who actually died, right? And so that's really the main point of the Antichrist conversation that the writer in John has. It's not regarding this person that we're waiting to be born at a particular time, and he's gonna do all of these miracles and all of these things, and Lord willing, this can because we're already at, like, we've been going into this for a little bit, but Lord willing, we could do maybe a part 2 to this and actually just kind of tear down like the misinformation and some of the misnomers that get applied to the Antichrist controversy, quote unquote. But with that, unless you brothers have anything else, we can start to end it off. But I want to end it off by giving all praises to the Most High God, whose name is Yahweh, and I'll do so in the name of His beloved Son Yahushua. But any of you brothers got any points?
Beautiful lesson, man. All praise to the Most High, and beautiful read by the brother Ezra.
Con, all praises.
Con our praises, to Yakim. I will say, we should do a part 2 because, there's certain things me and the brother Aaron was going back and forth on pertaining to the prophecies they used to substantiate that doctrine. So Lord willing.
Con, I think maybe his mic might have cut out, but Con, for sure, man. Lord willing, we could do a part 2 to this. Because like the brother said, we were speaking a little bit earlier, and a lot of people, they utilize a bunch of passages to teach an Antichrist doctrine, but 95% of the passages don't even have the word Antichrist in it. Like, you using 2 Thessalonians 2, the word Antichrist doesn't appear. And honestly speaking, you have scholars that they push this notion forward as well. They'll say, yeah, the Antichrist is the man of sin and all of these things. But it's like you're just pulling this. You're not pulling this from the Bible necessarily, because the word Antichrist is not there. So it's really just Christian dogma that's being stamped onto the Bible and being presented as it's the actual case. Right. So, Most High willing, we could really do a part 2 to this and kind of break that down and go into what those scriptures are actually talking about. But if there'll be nothing else, we could close it out. I'm going to close it out with the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 24 on down. And it says, Yahweh bless thee and keep thee. Yahweh make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. And with that, I'll say Shalom.
Shalom, Mark. Shalom, family.
It ain't for everybody. 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 Yeah, many you call, but few get chosen. Matthew 22 and 14. My righteousness gonna exceed that of the Pharisees.